Right now in Hoosier News Source, IU students are required to get their flu shots this fall. And we hear the latest from freshman dorm residents about their residence hall's COVID protocols.
And I have a look at the aftermath of Hurricane Sally, as well as rain chances for this weekend. Hoosier News Source starts now.
Hello and welcome to Hoosier News Source. I'm Julia Lostetter. We begin Hoosier News Source with the latest COVID-19 updates. Andrew Lamparski is on campus with the latest numbers from the university. Andrew?
Thanks, Julia. In the latest round of data shared by the university, we see an increase in tests, but a decrease in cases. We're now sitting at a positivity rate of just about 2%. Out of over 9,500 tests between September 13th and 19th, just 214 came back positive. That's a drop from over 300 in the last round. But the biggest change we see this week is in Greek houses. Their positivity rate is down to just 3.3%, down 11% from the week before. Residence halls are pretty much in the same place they were, at 2.2% from 2.4% the week before. And finally, if we look at on-campus isolation and quarantine housing, that's at the same occupancy as last week, 21%. And while we're still battling COVID, flu season is just around the corner. But this year, IU says they're planning on requiring students to get a flu shot. I spoke with university officials this week to find out how that will work and why we haven't heard too much about the mandate just yet.
No, I had no idea.
I had no idea that IU was mandating the flu vaccine.
These IU students had no clue that IU is planning on requiring students to receive a flu vaccine. That's because there hasn't been a formal announcement just yet. Just this from Dr. Aaron Carroll last Wednesday.
Flu shots required. We're going to start, I think, trying to ramp up our own clinics to give them our own, infrastructure in October, early October. But anyone who wants to get a flu shot should get a flu shot. Don't wait for us if you want to go earlier.
We reached out to the Assistant Director of Public and Environmental Health for the university, who gave us these deadlines for students to report their flu shots. December 1st for anyone planning on returning to campus after Thanksgiving break, and January 15th for anyone coming back to campus in February. IU Health Infectious Disease Specialist Dr. Tom Rasmalis says limiting the spread of the flu is especially important this year.
And since the symptoms overlap a lot, it's going to be hard to tell, well, who has COVID and who has the flu and who has something else.
But one of the university's exemptions for the vaccine requirement? Simply refusing to get the vaccine. And while some didn't want the requirement to begin with,
I'm gonna get the flu whether I get the flu vaccine or not.
And others did,
I think that it's smart to cut our losses while we still can.
Dr. Rasmalis says young people are key to keeping this flu season in check.
Obviously, the young adult population and the student population play a big role in that and can make a huge difference if we can get everyone on board.
One thing that the Assistant Director of Public Health did want to make clear in his email was that the official mandate is that students have to report whether or not they've received the vaccine, but can opt out of actually receiving it. We should see a more formal announcement about all of this in the coming weeks. For Hoosier News Source, I'm Andrew Lamparski. Julia, back to you.
Thanks, Andrew. A campus ride-sharing service is also implementing new safety mandates for its passengers. IU Ride, formerly IU Safety Escort, is still providing free, safe rides to IU community members, but is now requiring riders and drivers to wear a mask over their mouth and nose. IU Ride asks that if people are sick or think they are sick, that they do not use public transportation and ride-sharing services. Pickups are suggested for one person, but the company will transport two people if they are going to the same place. IU Ride operates within Bloomington city limits, and you can request a ride by downloading the TransLock app and setting your pickup and drop-off locations. For more information on how to request a ride or to learn more about IU Ride, go to iuride.indiana.edu. One of the most memorable college experiences is looking a little different for students living in dorms this year. I'll toss it over to Hoosier News Source reporter Callie Lichter to tell you more. Callie?
Thanks, Julia. That's right. In a pandemic, students have to follow even more rules, both in and outside of their dorm rooms. I spoke with students about those new protocols. IU Residential Programs and Services has new COVID-19 policies in order to help mitigate the spread of the virus in dorms. Students like freshman Parul Gupta work through IUSG to help shape dorm policies.
So you're not allowed to have any guests in the building other than other Forest residents. So for example, if you want someone in your room, they have to live in Forest, and your dorm door has to remain open and you have to have masks on when they're in your room.
Students get 3 strikes if they break the rules. The first 2 are warnings. The third carries the risk of suspension. Freshman Ian Albin has 1 COVID-related strike.
There was a night about 2 weeks ago, a little more than that actually. I had about 12 people in my room.
He had to attend a Zoom meeting after his infraction.
They basically talked about risk minimization and how to be safe. They explained how it was a violation of the rules and what to do next time and what not to do.
He says that dorm administration has been more forgiving with minor infractions, like forgetting a mask to go to the bathroom. Even with these new rules, students can still spend time with friends without violating IU policy.
Honestly, just follow the rules because overall it's for the betterment of like the whole entire IU community. And once you get used to it, it's really not that bad to just be a little bit further away than the people you're talking to. Like, you can still see them, so it's not the end of the world. And just meet in public places. There's nothing special about a dorm room that you can't just meet somewhere else instead.
You can learn more about the new COVID policies at housing.indiana.edu under the Policies tab. Julia, back to you.
Thanks, Callie. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Supreme Court Justice, passed away this week at age 87 from complications of pancreatic cancer. President Trump has already begun his search to fill her seat. The president says that he expects to announce his nomination for the Supreme Court this weekend and that he will pick a woman. It's unclear if he will be able to fill her seat before Election Day, and Democrats argue that the nomination should wait until after the election. But regardless, the president has released a short list of possible nominees. Among them are Judge Barbara Lagoa, who is one of the first Hispanic women to serve on the Supreme Court of Florida, and Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's pick to serve on the 7th U.S. Court of Appeals. Coming up on Hoosier News Source, Caroline Clare tells us the upcoming forecast for the week, and we learn about scooter companies' plans to keep riders safe amid the pandemic. Welcome back. Caroline Clare joins us in studio with this week's forecast. Caroline?
Thanks, Julia. Before we get into this week's weather, let's take a look back at the impact of last week's Hurricane Sally. Making its landfall as a Category 2 hurricane, maximum winds reaching 105 miles an hour. That, paired with the torrential rain it brought, led to a lot of flooding in the area, bringing 2 deaths. 1 drowned, unfortunately, and the other was the storm cleanup crew. Hurricane Sally had many similarities with the 2017's Hurricane Harvey, where both were in the Gulf and were extremely slow, and because of this brought torrential rain in Texas and in the South. Over 500,000 people without power after Hurricane Sally struck. However, there is less people now without power, about down to 40,000 now. And as the National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration predicted in April, this year was going to be an extremely active season for hurricanes, and it has held true. We are now into the Greek alphabet, Wilbur, Alpha, and Beta now in the Atlantic this season. Now let's take a look at a potential rainy start to this week here in Bloomington. A cold front coming down from a low center in Canada will be weakly coming by, bringing rain to our southeast, possibly here in Bloomington, going Sunday into Monday. However, as we take a look at the rest of the week, we can expect some pretty dry weather. Starting off on Wednesday, mostly sunny and 77 and just high 70s until we get into the weekend with that cold front. Small rain chance on Sunday and Monday, and going into next week, slight temperature drop just into 70s from that weak cold front. Take advantage of these warm temperatures and have a great week. Julia, back to you.
Students continue to ride electronic scooters on campus, but this mode of transportation isn't the safest during the pandemic. Hoosier News Source reporter Luke Christopher Norton brings us the story.
Electric scooters are a common sight in Bloomington, be it on campus or downtown in the city itself.
Lyman Bird scooters will be a familiar sight for returning students, whereas the new Wheel Ride scooters were introduced after students were sent home for spring break.
But is it still safe to use these scooters during a pandemic? Well, I talked with IU Dr. W. Graham Carlos about just that.
Well, scooters are stored outdoors, which helps because we don't believe the virus exists as long on surfaces outdoors. So scooters can be a great assist for students trying to get around campus, get to class. I think it's a good resource for students to have and use. I think if you take the necessary steps to protect yourself and others, it's a system of transport that we can keep using.
When I asked what steps could be taken, Dr. Carlos mentioned sanitation methods for a student's own hands along with the scooter itself.
So my advice would be for everybody to have maybe wipes or gel bottles of sanitizer. You want at least 60% alcohol in the gels and to use them regularly, especially after high-touch surfaces. I would sanitize my hands immediately after the use. Boy, if I was planning to use a scooter, I'd probably have some wipes and just wipe it down for anybody that might come after me as well. So I would use it if I needed it.
If students take the proper precautions, scooter use should be safe. So scoot away, Hoosiers. For iOS TV News, I'm Luke Christopher Norton.
Dr. Carlos advises students to carry hand sanitizer at all times and to use it after riding the scooters. IU not only announced football will return in October, but the start of basketball season in November. Hoosier News Source reporter Lexi Vanetti joins us with the updates. Lexi?
That's right, Julia. Football is back, and the season kicks off bright and early at 8 a.m. on October 24th against Penn State. No fans, daily COVID tests for staff and players, and conference-only games for the Hoosiers. This is a tough but beatable schedule. I talked with IUS TV football reporter Haley Jordan on the lineup, and she said, "I don't think the schedule favors Indiana this year. Of course, there are going to be some easy wins like the game against Rutgers, but also some easy losses like Ohio State." She said, "I think the Hoosiers will go 3-5 or 4-4 this season, but I hope I'm wrong." And I have to agree and disagree with Haley this year. As cliche as it is, it won't be like any other. So I would not be surprised to see the Hoosiers go 4-4 or even 5-3 with losses against Michigan, Ohio, and Wisconsin. But we want to hear your thoughts. Do you like this schedule? What do you predict the Hoosiers' record to be? Tweet at IUS TV News your thoughts on the upcoming season. And as Julia mentioned, this Thanksgiving will be stuffed with the return of Big Ten basketball. Basketball will resume on November 25th. We are still waiting to hear from the NCAA for COVID-19 and schedule updates. And although sports are returning, no athletes will be practicing this November 3rd. Election Day is now a mandatory day off from IU Athletics, with efforts to get more student athletes out to vote. Stay safe and register to vote, Hoosiers. Back to you, Julia.
Thanks, Lexi, and thank you for watching this week's episode of Hoosier News Source. To learn more about this week's stories, you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at IUS TV News. I'm Julia Lostetter from Bloomington, Indiana. We'll see you next time.